Gonna marry the night. I won't give up on my life. I'm a warrior queen, live passionately tonight.
My name is Kathy Douglas. This is my story of my recent occupation at this wonderful Calgary hospital. In this film, we will examine the documents that essentially allowed the province of Alberta and the city of Calgary to hold me for 15 days without charge or the due process of my rights. I am a Calgary artist, photographer, writer, poet, activist, and advocate. I was told by officers of the Calgary Police Services that I was being brought in to speak with a doctor and the "we want to help you" speech. Instead, I was led to the Foothills Emergency Department's room 35, where a hospital gown was thrown down and I was asked to change in front of men and cameras. They were getting ready to rip my clothes off when I at first refused to comply. This very threatening action by hospital staff was very clearly meant to provoke a fight or flight response. I did neither. I just sat down to write this short note which clearly states my request for a patient advocate. These are not the actions of a person who is out of control. The male security guard closest to me would only identify himself as Robert. He refused to give me either his identity number or show me his provincial license contrary to provincial law. The one female security guard that was present was unprofessional as she was laughing and joking with the male security guards. I was told to give up my pen as I might use it as a weapon even though I had not made such a threat. It was made very clear that this was my tool used to report their actions. I was then left with nothing to do. This Form 1 document was not produced until 8 hours after I arrived. Although they created a dispute in time, such a dispute cannot be justified in such a legally important document, especially since I was denied in several requests access to the telephone and the number of the patient advocate for over 14 hours when their office had been closed for the night. Dr. C. Holman then decided that I was suffering from some kind of diminished capacity without even making record of my behavior, like I was using a pen and paper, or that my behavior in the first 8 hours was basically calm. This Form 1 document was the first of two required, and yet it was obliterated by carelessness with room numbers 34, 35, 36, and 37. So notes were applied to this document that had nothing whatsoever to do with my care. The Foothills Hospital Medical Center emergency room number 35 is a cell, 7 by 10 feet, with a bed 3 by 6 feet. No, actually, it was this foam structure that was locked to the floor with a pillowcase, a bottom sheet, and a nice, warm, comfy flannel sheet if you asked nicely. I was not being hospitalized. I was being imprisoned and accused of being violent when I had not committed a violent act or gave any indication that I would commit a violent act. From my bed to the door of this cell, all reinforced steel, with left to right along the ceiling a camera, a protected smoke or fire detector, and one of 2 vents. This document was created almost 2 days after I arrived in cell 35. In these pages I described that even though I declared several times that I would take their medication orally, that they chose to be violent in injecting me. I was rushed by at least 6 people. So I offered passive resistance, basically not giving them much of a fight. One security guard made a point of bending my right wrist backwards, an injury that went ignored by the hospital. All of this was justified through the use of this shoddy Form 1 document. Dr. Stephen Amadella is a real piece of Freemason work. He spent more on his clothes and shoes than I do in a year's rent. He came at me with the Freudian I, see, and the leading questions crap. I immediately told him that I wasn't going to play any of his head games and that he could get out. I am so amazed that Stephen Amadella would so blatantly lie as to his observations. He used that I asked for a patient advocate as a reason to hospitalize me. He noted that I didn't want hospitalization, but failed to note that it would be at the Peter Lougheed Center. We never spoke about my neighbor, and this film is going to the media. The worst he could describe me was irritable and angry, and that was only after all of their abuse. Dr. Amadella's assertions failed to note my request for oral medication, the receipt of an involuntary ejection, or my declaration of, "You disrespect me, I disrespect you." I then proceeded to urinate all over their floor. I then sang a native song of grief for as long as I could. I then lay down on my cot for the duration of my stay. Out of 6 meals, I was only given 2 and a really bad sandwich. After almost 2 days on this cot, my back was aching. Early Saturday morning, 2 nurses showed up just inside the door. I leaned over backwards, just far enough to cause one of them concern that I might actually drop the 2 feet to the floor. I adeptly swung my feet around to face them sitting up, and one of them asked me how I was doing. My reply was a terse, "This isn't treatment. This is torture. You either find me a bed or you release me." Her reply was, "Message received," and she asked if there was anything that she could get for me. My request was for pen and paper, which was given to me so that I could make these notes from my memory. Within a couple of hours of the nurse's visit, I was confronted with an open door, a wheelchair, a male security guard, and a purple-bloused porter. My transport to this hospital's Unit 22 awaited me, and thus began my journey to my home for the next 13 days. Upon arrival to the unit and all its boards, I was confronted by signs for the patient advocate with the phone number, and the patient phone was provided. I was then presented with this notification of certification, along with 2 formal certificates filed by Doctors Holman and Amadella. It was dated from December 2nd to January 2nd, which was 1 day past the provincial 30-day requirement by law. I signed the form to indicate that it had been read to me on December 3rd. It was presented to me some 2 days after I requested the patient advocate. As I now believe, the whole patient committal process is dependent upon the patient filing the appeal. The whole system is really quite crafty. I think the doctor was annoyed with me after I described the process to a student nurse, explaining why it is a conflict of interest for the hospital to be involved in filing the appeal. I put off writing the appeal, and when I did on December 6, I had to ask for the Form 12 application. The hospital's nurse wanted to help me write the appeal, but I did it on my own anyway. Then I asked for a copy. Unit 22 staff held off filing the appeal. 3 hours later, I withdrew my appeal, and they shredded their original copy. In subsequent days, another patient showed me their paperwork, and we figured that this document was given out to them by accident. I think once this document is completed through the committal process, the province can do whatever it wants with you. It is a system from which one cannot escape. Recent changes in the law are reflected in Form 1 so that the psychiatrist can suppose how one is going to behave in the future. And this document provides the psychiatrist with the ability to run all those little tests and hold you a long time. Let me kid you not. This power can be wielded powerfully. It is starting to look like 1930s Germany. Through it all, I proved myself to be quite capable. The last 13 days, I was quite comfortable. I donated this artwork, Reflections, to the hospital in the hopes that it will find a wall, a home, and that all others will find their way back home. In the end, I was given a classic sorry, but we cannot help you. I'd like to end my story with my poem written during the Occupy movement that says, "The opposite of greed is suffering. The opposite of wealth is homelessness. The Japanese have a saying, 'Silent is the flower.' The opposite of flower is a human being, one who can think, feel, and speak. So people, speak your minds. and let the flowers be silent. Hey, 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 oh, ha, hey, ho, hey, hi, oh, hey, hey, ho.